Attorney Phil Jusino, and this is the Phil Jusino Show. On YouTube, it's called the Phil Jusino Podcast. This show is brought to you by Big Belly Barbecue, the best barbecue on Long Island there in Smithtown. I was there a while back. I had a cheeseburger. It was pretty good. My special guest tonight is Ed Vilbig, coming at you from Atlanta. Ed, good evening.
Good evening.
We have a lot of show activity coming up. We have comedian Paul Bond. He will be on January 2nd at 7 o'clock. And the day before that, Barbara Williams, skating coach extraordinaire. Fantastic. She was coaching my daughter, my son. She also coached the Islanders, the skating coach for the Islanders during the Stanley Cup years, 79, 80, and 81, and so on. And she also coached the New Jersey Devils. And tonight, if you guys can stay up at 10 o'clock, the Phil Jusino show will be on Cablevision for you Long Islanders on Channel 115, 10 p.m. Channel 115. A former client of mine, Matthew Yaloa, he was charged with a very serious crime, and we navigated through the criminal justice system, and he came out, he found justice. So that'll be on tonight. So let's get started. I have Ed Vilbig on. He's on the phone, coming from Atlanta. He was sitting in my chair. I wasn't too happy that he was in my chair. I told him 2 days ago he should have been in the chair to my left. But he plopped himself down on my chair. I took a picture. I don't know if my producer can put that up. But Ed and I were roommates at Fordham University in the Bronx. My best memory of Ed, too, that he was on the radio, WFUV, and also he liked the show Hawaii Five-0. He made me watch it because he owned the TV back then. So, Ed, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you and your audience tonight.
Thank you. Now, Ed, let me ask you a question. Now, when we were in college, I always knew I was going to be an attorney. Once the dream of being a major leaguer was over, I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't think when I knew you, was education on your radar?
No, it wasn't. That's a great question, because when I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to graduate college. That was my main goal. Okay. But going into education, I never thought, I went into education in 1991, I never thought that we would be in this type of environment where it is just so crazy.
But what made you decide? So college, you don't think you go, I think you were thinking maybe business banking, correct? Something along those lines?
Yeah, I didn't know. At first, when I got out, I worked for an insurance company. Then I worked for a bank. And my father was in education, taught at St. Anthony's High School.
He's an institution over at St.
That time it was in Smithtown. And I loved, he used to come home. He liked his work. He had summers off. Was always with the family. And I was working in Manhattan, and I was getting up like 5:30 in the morning and commuting in on the Long Island Railroad, coming home. I wouldn't get home till 7, 8 o'clock at night. And I said, you know what, maybe I need to look at a different field.
And then, so you decided teaching at some point. How did you get into that? What did you have to do?
Basically, I got into teaching because there was a shortage at that time. Nothing like now. Now there's a real shortage. But they would just, as long as you had a college degree, they would take you, and then you would take classes after you signed up, with the New York City school system.
And then you had to get a master's within a certain amount of time?
I was 151, and then I started to go to school.
Got it. So tell me a little bit about your first teaching experience.
It was a rude awakening, much different than I was used to. I went to Fort Salonga Elementary School, then I went to Kings Park Junior High, then I went to St. Anthony's, and it was totally different than what I was dealing with in the South Bronx. I started teaching right around the corner from Yankee Stadium. We have so much to be thankful for in terms of, growing up middle class, and to go into a neighborhood where kids don't have enough to eat, and they don't know where, They don't know how they're going to get their clothes clean to come to school, and just the urban environment was a rude awakening for me.
Now, how did you find teaching to those students? Did you feel that they had the support of their family, like parent-teacher conference? Did the mother and father and grandfather show up? How was that?
To be honest with you, that is part of the problem in the inner city. Very rarely would you have a mom and dad show up for a parent conference. Even now, I work in Clayton County, Georgia. I'm a behavior intervention specialist. Very rarely do I have students that have the type of family support that I had when I was younger.
Which obviously is very important. So let's go back. So you're teaching in the South Bronx, and how was the administration in that school at that time? Supportive?
I'm sorry, I had to change headphones. Could you repeat that question for me?
Sure. When you were teaching in the South Bronx, you were a teacher. You weren't an administrator. How did you feel the administration of that school was being handled?
Basically, it's the same thing now. We go back from 1991 to 2023. It's all political. Has really nothing to do with what you know and the type of work you do. And I see it now, and I saw it back then. There are some great administrators, and there's some administrators that are terrible. I remember we got a principal who was dating the Bronx borough chief, what do you call it? The head of the Bronx. I don't know what I forgot the term. And he was basically dating our principal, and she had no experience as an administrator, but they made her principal of my school. That's when I realized how bad administration was.
Now, for how long did you teach in New York State or the city of New York?
About 6 years, from 1991 to 1997.
Right. And let's go to 97. Let's say the last year you taught. Where was that?
That was IS 151 in the Bronx.
Okay, so you were in the Bronx the whole 6 years?
That was at PS 95, I think it was. I went to a new school that they opened up, a K through 8 school they were piloting. My friend became the principal there, and he took some good teachers that he knew, and I went over there, and I taught there for 2 years.
All right. Now, your last year there, what grade were you teaching?
I was teaching grades 6, 7, and 8. They had me teaching, I think I was teaching math, social studies, and reading.
And what was your experience there?
Oh, it was a new school. It was brand new, and it was a school that basically was K through 8. They were piloting at that time, and it was nice being in a new school. And most of the other schools that I taught in were always old and had all kinds of issues going on. But this to be in a new school was real nice. But after teaching there for 2 years, I figured that it was time to move on. Got tired of the New York City hustle and bustle and how expensive everything was. And I remember we signed a contract for 5 years and it was 5 years and it was only 10% raise. And I said, it's time to move to a different state.
Do you think that the teachers union, I'm not a big fan of the teachers union. I'm fine with teachers, but the teachers union, what was your experience with that entity? I believe there's a different person in charge now, but what was your experience with the teachers union?
I was the chapter leader in my building because I wanted to make a difference. Actually, I went into education because I want to help people. A lot of people don't go into education because they want to help people. I wanted to help kids, and I enjoyed it. So I became the chapter leader for the union in my school building, and the politics was I was really 20, my early 20s. It was really mind-boggling to see how the union manipulates things. They protected incompetent teachers, and that's why I was not a big supporter of the UFT, okay. The United Federation of Teachers.
Now, when you say politics, and I get what you're saying, so it wasn't a meritocracy. It wasn't like the best and brightest teachers got promoted, got the jobs. It was more based on politics?
Exactly. And the better job that you do, the more you have to take up for people that are not doing their job. That's what really annoyed me the most.
And how would that pan out?
Let's say you're a good teacher, and the teacher across the hall the kids don't like that teacher. And the kids are walking out of the room, and the administration's involved. And what happens? The administration ends up taking kids out of that room and putting them in your classroom. So you might have 35 kids, And that other teacher, where the kids don't want to go, she's sitting there with 10 kids because everybody's walking out and they're putting kids in other classrooms.
Now, when you left
That's
New
just,
York, where did you go?
I came down to Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. And the reason I liked Atlanta, I came down for the Olympics, and they said this is a progressive city. And I decided to make the move to Atlanta.
And how was that move? You went from the Bronx to Atlanta. What was that contrast like?
Actually, in terms of quality of life, it was great. For what I paid in rent in Flushing, Queens, I basically could afford a house, and the standard of living was better, and it was much cheaper. Now, if you fast forward to 2023, we're almost on the same price range as New York. Everything has gone skyrocket here because you know that the migration from the north to the south, there's a shift in this country in terms of where people are living. Everybody's moving out of New York, California, moving to Georgia, Florida, Texas. And that's why you saw Georgia, that was once a red state. Now we are purple because you have so many people coming here from the north, and they're taking their politics with them. And we're not a solid red state anymore.
Right, but where you are now, I can't imagine a lot of New Yorkers, let's say, or Northerners moved into those particular neighborhoods. Maybe your neighborhood, but I'm saying where you either were a teacher or an administrator.
Most people in Atlanta are from, very few people that I know were actually born here and lived here the whole life. Atlanta is just where people come for work and for different quality of life.
Now, what county do you live in?
I live in Cobb, 1 mile from the city of Atlanta.
So this Cobb, this Fulton County, right? That's where the stadium is?
Right. There's really no such thing as Atlanta. Atlanta is 12 counties put together. It's kind of like having Nassau, Suffolk, and annexing, the city, all the 5 boroughs, and then Hudson up north, and parts of
Connecticut,
and just calling it New York City.
Okay.
So Atlanta is 12 counties put together.
Wow. Okay. Now, when you went down to Atlanta, you were teaching in a city, not the suburbs, correct?
Exactly.
So
I was teaching in the same type of environment as I was teaching in the South Bronx.
Okay. So what was
with my experience? When they saw my experience, that's where they moved me out of all the schools. I was in a place into a challenging environment.
Okay. What was the racial makeup of, let's say, the students in your school when you started in Atlanta?
It's probably 95% African American.
Okay. And what was the other 5? Was it just white? Was it Latino, Asian? Hispanic? Mm-hmm. And did you find the same issues that you were dealing with in the South Bronx that you now found yourself in Atlanta?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And explain that a little bit. I know what you said, how things were in the Bronx. Now you're in Atlanta. You walk into the classroom, and let's say your first year, what was that like?
Well, coming from New York to here to Atlanta, there's no union, so there's no asking for a break. You don't have planning periods. Like on planning period, they say you have to go fill in for a teacher that's absent, and you have to go to this meeting and that meeting. You didn't have the union there to support you. Plus, the school day is a lot longer. Instead of having 6 hours and 20 minutes, the school day in Atlanta is 8 hours for teachers. So that was a big shift. But in terms of dealing with the kids, they had the same exact problems as the kids up north. A lot of it, poverty and issues, family structure, all that is what I had to deal with when I came to Atlanta.
Now, you said there was no union, no teachers unions in Atlanta. That's still the same currently?
There's unions, but they don't have collective bargaining rates, or they don't have collective bargaining rights. So they don't bargain they don't set your salary. They really they're just there to protect teachers if you get in trouble, and they're really not even good at that. You have to pay to be in the union too.
What about tenure? I had Frank Vetro on about a month or so ago, and they were talking about tenure, the due process. Do you have tenure there?
Yeah, there's no tenure for administrators. I was let go because they decided this assistant superintendent wanted to give the job to one of his buddies. So there's no tenure for administrators, but for teachers, there's there is tenure, but they don't really. If they want to get rid of you, they will. It's really not, it's nothing like New York, where if you're a tenured teacher, they won't get rid of you.
Now, how did you become an administrator?
I became an administrator. That's another great question, because I saw so many bad administrators in New York and Atlanta. I said, I have to do more. Helping kids, teaching, that's great, but as an administrator, you could do a lot more. And I went and took the classes, and I got a job because I knew I could do a better job than half the administrators that I work with.
Now, your first administrative job, was it like a vice principal or something like that?
Yes, it was assistant principal, vice principal, and it was not in Atlanta. It was where I kept applying to Atlanta, and I worked there for 6 years, kept applying and wouldn't get the job. So I got a job out in the suburbs of Atlanta, which was totally different than working in the Atlanta city school system.
How so?
It was a middle-class school system. You had parents, two-family parents, households. You had, it was socioeconomic status wasn't low. People had money, people had jobs, totally different environment. Kind of like when I was growing up, where my first administration job was exactly like Long Island for the most part.
Now, when you're teaching in some of these, let's say, inner cities, and you talked about the problems they face, what happens to a lot of those students? I guess some go on to college, but is it in lower numbers, let's say, in a more affluent school district, I would think?
Unfortunately, right now, schools in Georgia, there's this big kick to make sure that everybody graduates. So I think my county, most of the counties in Georgia have between 80 and 90% graduate. I could tell you, of the 80% that's graduating, if they don't go on to college or learn a skill, they're sitting home. But Georgia doesn't really care about that as long as they get those graduation numbers. The media loves it. Looks like the schools are doing better. But for the most part, a lot of the kids that graduate don't have the skills to go to college, or they don't learn a trade, and they're sitting at home, looking for work. And if they do get a job, they get upset. I hear this a lot. They get a job in the fast food industry. They don't like the wages, the hours, and they don't. Some kids don't stay in that job for very long.
Let me ask you this, Ed. I know, let's say I went to Smithtown West, and they had a BOCES program. They had a shop. They had certain things for kids who, let's say, weren't going to be going to college and learn a trade. In the inner city schools that you taught at, and maybe you didn't teach at the high school level, but did you see those kinds of programs so that, look, not every kid is going to go to college, and that's fine. Some is going to be an electrician, a plumber, the trades. Did you see those schools setting up those types of programs?
In the middle schools, nothing. Now, in the high schools where I work now, they do have a program, but it's very small, and they just basically scrape the top of the top layer. They don't really. A kid doesn't. Or I should say, scholar. We use the word scholar. A scholar doesn't graduate being able to be an electrician or be a mechanic. They'll take 1 or 2 classes, and that's it. They really should. High schools really should do more. Have more programs to help kids get into the trades. I know down here there's such a shortage of electricians and plumbers. The schools really don't have those programs.
But why not? Look, we're talking about it. I was, in all honesty, I was an adjunct professor at Dowling many years ago. I taught business law. So I don't want to say I'm an educator, but I was in the classroom and I educated college students. And it's not, let's say, far-fetched to realize that some kids are going to go into the trades, and that's great. Look, if my car breaks down, or if your car broke down, Ed, you're not bringing it to me. You're bringing it to a mechanic. Good mechanics sometimes can be hard to find. Like you just said, there's a need for electricians. Why doesn't a school realize that? It's not a secret. Why don't they do it? Is it that there's no money, or there's not enough money in the budget? Why don't they do that?
I think they want to push everybody to go to college. And as you said, some students are not college materials. But there's a mindset that you want to get everybody to go to college. I don't know where that's
And I
coming
think that's a
from.
mistake because,
I
like
don't
you
know
said,
why they push that,
it's not for
but
everybody.
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that because there are some kids. I have kids. I do a lot of counseling work, and I'll have kids tell me, "I'm not going to college. I can't take this class," and they don't want the physics and the chemistry and those type of classes. They want to do something else, and it's not there for them. Now they have one or two classes in mechanics. They might have one class in in HVAC, but that's it. There's not a commitment to the trades. It's all about getting the kids college and career ready. That's
Think
what they
about
say.
it. A kid
College
that,
bound.
let's say,
Even
becomes
when
an
the kids are
electrician.
not ready for it, that are reading 2-3 years below their grade level, you still want them to go to college.
Now, let's say a kid becomes an electrician, right? Young man, young woman, or they go into the trades. They can make a lot more money than somebody going to college and majoring in Russian literature. And
You're
then
exactly
have to
right.
pray
And
that Joe Biden forgives their student loan. A trade we need electricians. I had a tough time finding a good electrician. I found one, but it took me a while. The same thing for mechanics. It took me a little while when my old other mechanic retired. Or plumbing. When these things break, we got to pick up the phone and call them. And these guys and women can make a lot of money if they're given the opportunity. And I think schools should get them ready for those kinds of things. It's not just college. I think a school has a responsibility to do that.
you're exactly right. And unfortunately, a lot of kids don't have someone at home telling them, "Hey, you should go become an electrician, or you should become a plumber, or you should go into HVAC." There's no one guiding them, so they graduate and they're at home, and then they're struggling to make a living.
Right. Yeah, and like when I grew up, again, Smithtown, pretty well off district. Um, it was almost like everybody was going to go to college, but not everybody did go to college. People became police officers. People became firemen. People entered the trades. People took and I think a school has to at least whet somebody's appetite. I'm not saying the kid's going to graduate with a degree or a license in plumbing, let's say, but at least give them an outlet to learn those kinds of things. And I think it's unfortunate. Mike Rowe, the dirty job guy, right? They
Yes,
give out and he promotes those kinds of things. Nothing wrong with going to college. I went to college. I went to law school. You went to college. Nothing wrong with that. But it's not for everybody. And I always joke. I say, imagine a society where everybody's a lawyer. That'd be pretty bleak. Let me tell you, because we need
well,
people to build buildings. We need people plumbing, electricians. We need all of those things. Not everyone's a doctor. Not everyone's a lawyer or a teacher or an accountant. So we need those kinds of trades or those kinds of skills. And it doesn't seem that the schools, let's say, are helping those kinds of students out. Because if all you're doing is say, go to college, and the child is not, let's say, suited for college, that kid's doomed to fail.
you're exactly right. And also, not just the trades. How about police officers, nurses? The schools are almost out of touch with what society needs. There are so many jobs that are available that the kids are not qualified for. So how about training them to become firemen, nurses,
Well,
police officers, civil servants, and or the trades? Not, as you said, not everybody's going to college, and I just think it's unfortunate that schools don't do more after the kids leave. Once those kids walk across the stage, get the diplomas, the counties I've worked in are very happy. They get their federal aid. The school get the
Ed,
federal money goes to the
is
school
it fair to
because that
say,
kid graduated,
right,
and that's it.
right,
After that, there is no coordination from what you do after you walk across that stage, and
is it,
many of the kids have a tough time,
right, let me
and
ask
they're
you this.
easily led to drugs and gangs in that type of environment because it's tough for them to survive after they graduate from school.
But I think it's fair to say that a lot of the kids that come from the inner cities that don't become police officers because many in the inner cities don't like police. Where do you think the defund the police movement started? Right? BLM, defund the police. So a lot of the kids that are brought up in that environment, they're not really taught to respect the police. Is that fair to say from what you've seen?
You're right, but I have to tell you, I've been working in Atlanta, in the inner city, and working in Georgia, in the inner city. There are so many good kids that just need the direction, but unfortunately, a few of the bad apples take, the ones that you see in the media. They're the ones that get all the publicity, and the other kids that really want to learn have a tough time doing it. There are some kids that don't want to get into drugs and don't get into gangs, and what happens? They're pushed into it through their friends. And I see it all the time. It's unfortunate. But there's really not, you don't see, because the parents are not really involved. I've seen kids being suspended from school when the teacher said, "Get out of my room." Then the teacher says, he walked out. And the school suspends the kid for 5 days from school. But the parents are not going to come up so they can get away with it. Now, you try doing that in one of the other counties I worked in when I was an assistant principal, and you put a kid in detention after school for 1 hour, and they're going down to the board to complain. Totally different.
Now, Ed, what about, we talked about police, firemen, important jobs. The military. Do those schools allow, let's say, the military to come in to recruit?
They have an ROTC program, but it's very low key. You don't really see a lot of, a commitment to come into the school to get students to join the military. I work very close to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, Atlanta Airport, basically. And I could see the planes from the school. I would think that Delta and all these companies could come into the schools and get some of these kids to, train them to do different things. And they don't. There's a big disconnect between the schools and corporations here in Georgia, from what I see. Now, people would disagree, but yeah, there are a few kids. Delta will come in, grab a few kids here and there, but there's not a commitment to really helping the kids in the K through 12 environment.
What about the police?
Corporations.
Do they allow the police department to come in and say, okay, this is officer friendly, and this is what a police officer does, and hey, maybe some of you guys and women would like to be police officers. Do you see that?
I've maybe in 20, 25 years, I might have seen that 2 or 3 times.
That could be something that they could improve on, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But we have to give kids more options. Besides working, right now I'm dealing with some students and they want to graduate. And what I want to focus on in the second semester coming up, starting in 2024, is what we're going to do after college. They've gone through 12 years and haven't even, or not, I shouldn't say after college, after graduation. Nobody's even talked to them about a plan, what to do after you graduate in May. And that's what I want to focus on.
Now, let me ask you this. What about the school boards? We hear about the school boards in Virginia and New York. What's the interplay between the school board, let's say where you were a teacher originally, and the teachers and administrators?
I'm not a big fan of school boards because I don't understand how they could pay superintendents $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. You have school systems here in Georgia that are paying their superintendents $500,000, and their scores are terrible. And most of the communities that they serve are poor and are lower socioeconomic status, but you're paying those type of salaries, and the school boards go along with it. So I don't understand a lot of things about education, although I've been in education my whole life almost. When I got out of college, as I said, I was in insurance banking for a while, and then I went into education. So majority of my career has been in education, and there's so many things I don't understand. I don't understand how a school board could pay somebody $500,000, and then you have a school bus driver that's making $8 an hour. Remember, minimum wage here in Georgia is a lot less than New York. Okay. You pay your teachers a lot less than New York, but then you expect them to do miracles, and the school boards all seem to go along with it. Nobody questions the salaries, and life goes on.
How would you describe the job of a superintendent?
Actually, I know a superintendent that just got promoted, and he has, it's a tough job. You're on call all the time. You're responsible for the well-being of he's got about 6,000 students, so it's a lot of work. But in a small system, to pay somebody $400,000 or $500,000 doesn't make sense to me. When you have people that are substitute teachers making less than $100 a day, there has to be some type of equity, and there's not in education. But the school boards go along with it, and deals are cut, and they approve these type of salaries.
Well, let me ask you this, and again, as a layperson, I've never been in public education. You have teachers, right? You have administrators, principals. You have a school board. Right? You have a superintendent. Right? The principal, is it fair to say the principal's job is to run that particular school?
It depends on the school system. Certain school systems give their principals autonomy to run the buildings the way they should be run. Other school systems get too involved. And the bigger the school system, the more bureaucracy. So I've been in school systems where there's so many people coming into the building and telling the principal what to do, and it makes life a lot harder. But a good school system will make sure that their students are progressing, their scores are good, their discipline is low. But some school systems are so massive that they're really not concerned about the students. It's all about political power, and it's about positions and salaries, and I see it all the time, and I'm just amazed. Like, what about the kids? You'll have mandates come out as nothing that doesn't even benefit kids, but it makes the school board look better, or it makes the school look better, but it's not really helping. They test so much down here. Perfect example. They test, and test. And then when the kids take the regular test, the scores are real low. So why aren't we fixing that? I said it a million times, but nobody wants to listen to me. Why not take out some of these tests? Or when you give a test, how about looking at the results of the test, giving the teachers the information so they can help rectify the problems that the students have, instead of giving them another test?
Sure. What about charter schools? How does that fit in?
Charter schools are basically where the future is going in education, because public education is failing for the most part, and except in affluent school systems where you have parents that are concerned, and then you have a good tax base. Those schools are doing well, but for the most part, public education is failing. Money is mismanaged, and parents get upset because their kids are not getting good education, and they put them in charter schools. Charter schools are outperforming public education. I just saw a study about a week ago that charter schools are doing better, and I think it has to do with, you take out the politics of public education in a charter school.
Now,
but remember, a charter school has to apply to get the charter to be a school. So there is politics there.
But what about a situation, you hear it gets political. The Republicans say give vouchers so some kids can go to, let's say, a private or a charter school. The Democrats don't like to. This is my question, and I never got a really good answer. Let's say you have a particular school district, and the kids that go to that school are within the boundaries of that school. And if you say, okay, we're going to give vouchers, so let's say those parents. So if the parent wants their kid to go to a charter school, they can do that. Now, obviously, everybody can't go to a charter school because that school system would shut down. So how do they do it? They do testing so that, let's say, the brightest kids in that particular school that pass certain tests can go to a charter school. Then you're leaving that school, in a sense, with the students that are not that smart. That hurts that school, right?
Every student should be able to go to any school they want. It's unfortunate that the employees of schools that I work with, people are very selfish, and they're only concerned about, I hear this all the time, if we give vouchers, we may be out of work, or we're going to lose half our kids.
That could happen.
And I want schools to be like businesses where you have to earn people's business.
But this is the problem.
In a regular school, nobody really cares because a student has to go here. They're not allowed to go anywhere else. Give students the option of going to good schools. I worked in one school system where I was in a tough school, and the administration was so bad. You go 3 miles down the road, they had a good administration, same demographics, and that school is doing much better. Why can't those kids go there?
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate.
It should not even be a question. Every kid should have the option to go wherever they want, and I don't understand how the Democrats could be against that. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Let me ask you this.
And I'm in the field.
All right. I went to Smithtown West, very good school. I live in the Three Village School District, Ward Melville, very good school. I pay a lot of taxes so that my kids are grown now, but so that I could put my kids in an excellent school. Let's say someone goes, and I won't even give the name of a town, I don't want to insult anybody, but we know the lesser, there's communities with, let's say, the lesser schools. Is it fair that, let's say, if everybody in a particular town wants to go to Ward Melville, how can that be? Because imagine if I got a letter saying, well, your kid didn't make the cut, your kid's not going to go to Ward Melville where you live, he's going to go somewhere else. I'd say, wait a minute, I live in the district. My kid, but by virtue of the fact that I live in the district, he should be going to Ward Melville. If every kid can go wherever they want to go, it'd be chaos, I think.
But the issue is you're hurting kids. You know some districts on Long Island that are not doing really well.
I do.
Those kids are basically in trouble because they're not getting the same type of education as the North Shore. We'll say North Shore and South Shore. You know there's some districts on the South Shore of Long Island that have had issues for the last 30, 40 years. Those schools are not even close to educating the students as they do on the North Shore. And those kids on the South Shore should be able to go to any school they want, a charter school, a private school. That funding the funding that goes to that school should go to the school where that kid wants to go. I don't think you should be able to. So
then there'd be no boundaries, Ed.
Say, okay.
There'd be no boundaries. A kid could go from CI or Port Jeff or wherever, can go wherever they want, and then I'm paying, tons of money in taxes.
If you live in that district, obviously you have to go to that school. If you're in a school and if you live in the North Shore, on the North Shore,
right,
and you want to go to a school, of course you go there. But if you're on the South Shore and you're in a failing school and they have an opening on the North Shore in a school, you should be able to go there. Or if that kid wants to go to St. Anthony's or Chaminade, they should be able to go to that school, and those tax dollars should go to that private school.
Okay, Ed, I got to read.
We're failing too many kids.
I got to read a couple of things. Mary Beth Harris says in Texas they do a lottery for kids whose parents want them to go to a charter school. It's not related to how they test. Okay, interesting. And James Kelly, Ward Melville actually accepts tuition from out-of-district students. Another thing I wasn't familiar with. And look, I have no problem with kids. I want kids to get a good education. And kids in a school district that, let's say, is not doing that well, they're at a disadvantage, no question. But let's say Ward Melville has a certain population, and there's only 5 openings. I don't want to fill those 5 openings. If my kid is in a class with 30 students, and all of a sudden they say, oh, we're going to bring a whole bunch of kids in, and my kid's in a classroom with 50 students, that's not right. I don't think it's right, because I'm paying all this money to make sure I moved into that school district, and I paid more money for my house at that time. So my kids shouldn't be penalized, and maybe the teachers and the administrators in those other schools should do a better job. And the fathers in those schools, let's say in those districts where you have fatherless, and we talked about this, Ed, the big problem is you have kids without fathers. In a lot of these inner cities, Chicago, Illinois, St. Louis, Baltimore, you have these kids, and you see it. You have a parent-teacher conference, and how many parents are coming in? Right? That's not my fault. Is it the fault of the teacher? I don't think so.
No, you're exactly right. But you got to do something to give kids a chance. And in some of these school systems that are really good, if there's some openings, I don't have a problem with kids coming from other school systems coming there. Now, obviously, you have to cap the size of the class. If it's 30, it's 30. Once you hit 31, you can't have that. So, but let's say you have 20 kids in a class. I think 10 kids from another school system should be able to come into that class if there's openings. Now, most parents, even if they're really poor and they have issues, they still want the best for their kids. Everybody wants the best for their kids. So we got to give kids a shot. And you're exactly right in terms of the schools that are failing. But when you have a bureaucracy like the teachers union and you can't get rid of an incompetent principal and you can't get rid of an incompetent teacher in New York City,
but Mary,
you have a problem. Now, one thing I do like about Georgia, they don't have tenure for administrators. So eventually bad administrators will get put out. But New York, if you're a bad administrator, you could go 30 years without getting put out.
Right. Now, Mary Beth Harris said in Texas they have a lottery. Now, let's say a very bad student wins the lottery and he gets to go to a top school. Do you think that's fair? Where a kid who busts his tail doesn't get to do that?
Great point. Do you know a lot of times if you take a kid from a troubling school and you put him in a school that's doing really well, that kid will turn around and you wouldn't even recognize that kid? I've seen it so many times. Mm-hmm. When I was an assistant principal, I was in a pretty good school. I made sure it was a good school. I was real strict on discipline. I made sure I hired good teachers. And I had students that I would go out on something. I'd go out, stick my neck out and say, I'm going to take this kid. I know he's been a problem in the last school system. We're going to take him. And next thing I know, 8th grade, he's going on to the high school. 3 years, no problems. The schools he came from, nothing but fights and problems. A lot of times, if you change the environment of the student and you give them a chance, they will meet expectations. Does that happen all the time? No. But it happens a lot. Okay. You take a kid out of a troubled environment, put him in a school where there is expectations, there's learning going on, there's discipline. A lot of times, the kids will completely change their ways. But if you keep them in that culture of a school where there's just no discipline, there's no learning going on, teachers have given up, and you'll get really poor test scores.
Look, I want to make a point. You've seen Trading Places, obviously the movie, great Christmas movie, right? Trading Places.
Yes.
Dan Aykroyd.
Great movie.
The comedian, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Help me out, Danny.
Dan Aykroyd?
No, Dan Aykroyd and the black comedian Eddie Murphy. I can't believe I forgot his name. His name was Billy Ray Valentine. And now I know it's a movie, it's a comedy, but conceptually, what they said was if you take a guy that let's say is downtrodden, never given any advantages, never give any breaks, and you put him in a situation like they did in the movie. Again, I know it's a movie, but he rose many levels, and then they took Dan Aykroyd, who was a spoiled rich guy, and they hit him. They put a lot of bad stuff on his shoulders, and he went downhill. So, like you just said before, you could take that student that's not doing well, put him in a different environment. Take a kid, for instance, who has no father, whose mother might have 5 kids with a whole bunch of different men. He's at a disadvantage. Put him in a family or an environment where there's love and respect, and he's given opportunities. You're right. That kid can do a 180.
I would like to see more students get out of the inner city and be able to go to good schools. And I would like to see, in a perfect world, I'd like to see schools in the inner city be on the same level as schools out in the suburbs. Right. But when there's a difference of tax money coming in, there's a difference of some of the stuff that in an inner city, administrators and teachers would never get away with out in the suburbs. But there's not enough people in the inner city speaking up and demanding changes. The last few years, education has really gone downhill. I don't want to get political about it since we're not talking politics, but something has to be done to help kids, because if the kids don't get educated, they don't get skills to go on to college or get a skill or go into a trade. They're on the streets, and then what happens? They go on social programs, or they get into drugs and violence. So the schools have got to do more
and I think
for our
kids.
It's
fair to say, Ed, it's not just one thing. You can't say, oh, it's inadequate teaching or administrators or no fathers. There's a whole bunch of things that are stacked up against those kids in the inner city. And I always say, I don't believe in white privilege. I believe in socioeconomic privilege. And there's not always a lot the government can do about it. What is government's job? To come into a middle class community and say, look, we're going to take your kids and we're going to send them to. No, you can't do that. So what are you left with? You're left with communities the way they are. So it starts with the family structure. I see a lot of pastors get interviewed, black pastors, and they say, it's not coming from me, it's coming from them, that the family structure is what's failing the black community. Before the civil rights legislation was passed, like in '64, the black family was doing better in many places than it is now. Why is that? Because the family structure, you had a mother and a father. And even when the whites divorce or break up, the father, more so than in the black community, and I don't think this is, I'm sticking my neck out here by saying that, the fathers are in the picture. I see that. My kids, I didn't see a lot of divorce growing up. I really didn't. But my kids, I've seen it in their friends, and the father's there. Even though he might not live with the kid, he's in the picture. In the black communities, they're not. So you said it before. You hit the nail on the head. Who are their role models? A gang member? Some thug on the street that they look to because they don't have a father figure, and maybe the mother is not a strong enough personality to keep that kid in line. Those are problems that the government can't really do anything about. So
You're
it's left to
exactly
the
right. I
teachers
was
to pick up the
working with
pieces.
a kid, really good athlete. Colleges would come to try to recruit him. Once they found out he had a 1.6 averages, 1.6 GPA average, he didn't get any scholarships. There was no one along the line to guide him to make sure to get a 2. All he needed was a 2.0. He had a 1.6, but education, doing homework, going to class, that was not a priority for him. He would, as I said, very good athlete, and that was about it. And it's unfortunate that he didn't have that guidance to get that 2.0, and he definitely would have got a scholarship. He was a star player,
and that's a shame,
football and baseball.
His life would have been very different. I got a call.
Yes.
Actually, I got a message. Jennifer Lynn, you know who that is, Ed? It says lotteries are standard.
I think so.
Lotteries are standard for charter schools.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Regardless of the state, some can add preferences for certain populations. Let me see if I can see a little bit more. When they apply for a charter, and they can also have sibling privileges. And someone else, Ray, looks like Shenanigan. It says, allow each district to have a charter school or private school. Secondly, as you touched on, the schools aren't 100% to blame. Some repercussions need to be put on the parents and the home. You want to hear something interesting, Ed? I saw an interview one time with Charles Barkley. And this is what he said. When he goes to a white college, right, colleges that are predominantly white, and he says, what do you guys want to be when you grow up? The hands go up, a doctor, a lawyer, something along those lines. And then he says he goes to a black college, and he says, what do you want to be? And a football player, a basketball player. The problem is, look, it's a lot easier to become a lawyer than it is to make the NBA. So these, let's say, minority students have dreams. But if they don't back it up, look at the kid. It was a perfect example you just gave. A star athlete. Now, maybe he didn't make it to the pros, but he could have parlayed his talents into an education. But because nobody was there for him to say, look, you need like a 2.5 or something to get into college, he had a 1.6. His whole future was shot because he didn't hit the books. He could have done it if someone would have been there to say, you want to be a college baseball player or a college football player, do a little bit better. Like what was that movie about the football player that lived on the streets and he got taken in by the family and he ended up the Blind Side, right? And all of a sudden he made it to the National Football League. But kids, I had a dream to be a Major League Baseball player, but those dreams are realized few and far between. You have a better shot at becoming a professional, getting a college degree, getting a real job, than you do making it to the NBA or making it to the NFL or one of those types. Great, if you make it, you make it. Look at Ohtani. How much what is he making? $7 million a year or 70 million, whatever the heck it is. It's incredible how much money the guy's making. But that's few and far between.
I worked in school systems. I worked in school systems where you couldn't get the parents to come up for anything. Uh, Parent conferences,
Well, I bet they'd
curriculum
be at a
nights,
football game on a
the
Friday
parents
night.
wouldn't come up. Or if you called, if child was in trouble and let's just try to get the parent to come up. No way. But a football game, basketball game, standing room only. That's a problem because a lot of people in the city don't see the value of getting that education. They go towards athletics because they think that's the way to get out of the predicament they're in.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but I've seen schools give away turkeys at Thanksgiving just to get the parents in so they could get their information because the school didn't even have working cell phones and good addresses and everything. Right. So you give a turkey to the parents, they'll come up so you get their information. I've seen that before.
I got a couple of things I got to read. Mary Beth Harris agreed with you on changing the environment, and they rise to the expectation. Much of it that is true. Somebody said Brown versus the Board of Education, which was 1954, which reversed Plessy versus Ferguson, which I believe was 1989, separate but equal. That was a very, very seminal case in education. Somebody had said, hold on, I'm looking here. I think I lost it for a second. So my friend Jerry Ehrlich, I want to be a basketball player. I think you have the same problem as me. We're not very tall, Jerry. So I don't think that's going to happen. And 1896, James Kelly had to correct me. I was only 2 years off. Okay, James, so give me a little bit of credit, partial credit. Ray Shenanigan, allow each district to have a charter school. I think I read that already. And someone corrected me or told me Mary Beth Harris is the blind side. I think my producer beat you to it, but thank you. And Jerry Ehrlich said, oh, no, another Christmas movie. That's like an inside joke. I always say Die Hard is one of my favorite Christmas movies. Allow each district to have charter schools. There's a lot of suggestions, and they're all good, but they have to be implemented. It starts with the family. It starts with good teaching. Then it continues with good administrators, school boards that want to help students. Like you said, Ed, you got into education because you wanted to help kids, right? Right?
Exactly.
It's like I got into the law. I want to help people. I help people differently than a teacher. It could be a divorce. It could be a family court. It could be someone who's arrested. But do you think that teachers, let's say, that have been in the profession for a while, lose sight of why they became a teacher in the first place?
A teacher has to deal with administration. Teacher has to deal with parents. A teacher basically has to take the role of parents that are not doing their job at home. They have to deal with a regimented schedule, because they have, the bell schedule. They don't have time to even sometimes use the restroom, make phone calls, or just sit back in the chair and rest. A lot of times during the planning period, a teacher will have to fill in for a teacher that's absent, or they have meetings. So you have teachers that work, they'll come into the building at 7:30 in the morning, and they don't leave to 4:30, 5 o'clock without a break. They'll be, when they're having lunch, they're in the cafeteria dealing with kids that have issues. It's nonstop. And then the teachers are supposed to, when are they supposed to write lesson plans, grade papers? Nobody thinks about that.
Right. Now, I want to make another point. When my kids went to Ward Melville years ago, one graduated in, I think, 2008, 2010, and my son in 2015. Not bad. When we went to a parent-teacher night, it was standing room only. You're bumping into people in the hallway. You go into a classroom. I remember I used to stand because some people had to sit down, and I would just be a gentleman in that stand. You'd see my wife would go. Grandparents sometimes would be there, but it was packed, Ed. It was packed. So if you're a teacher where you get that kind of support, that's going to motivate you. And if there's a problem, you can call home and say, little Johnny didn't do that well today, or something's going on. The parent is going to return that phone call, whether it be the mother or the father, whoever will return that phone call so that Johnny can be taken care of. When you don't have as a teacher, like when I taught at college, there was no parents to talk to. They were college students. But if you have little kids and you call and the parents don't want to know about it, what are you supposed to do? You still teach. You got to do your job, but you don't have that support that you get when you go to Smithtown West or Cold Spring Harbor and a lot of other schools. I'm just naming some of them that I've dealt with. Ward Melville, where you see that. And like you said, in some of those schools, Friday night lights, everybody shows up to watch the football team, right? Or we used to play on Saturdays. But if no one's showing up for parent-teacher conference, that tells you all you need to know, right, Ed?
You're exactly right. The key to a good school is having parental support and
That's what it starts
having
with.
a good administration and having good teachers. You lower class sizes, so you don't have 30 in the class, you have 20 in the class. You treat your teachers well. You keep your attention. You retain your good teachers, and you'll have a good school.
Right. And again, we talked about so many different things tonight. And as I said before, it's not just one thing. You can't put the blame on one segment or one person, but everybody has got to do better. I talk about that in the legal system. Everybody, you can't always blame judges. You can't blame attorneys. You can't blame whatever. You look at education and say, what is the purpose of education? Not to indoctrinate, right? I wish we had more time. That'll be another show, Ed. Not to indoctrinate these kids to support terrorists. Like you see that in the colleges. Disgusting, right?
Crazy.
Palestine, Hamas.
Absolutely crazy.
Right. Meanwhile, to them, the Jews are the devils. And where are they getting
Makes no sense to me.
I don't think they're always getting it at home. And it's a kind of a cool thing. Like I saw this girl come out and said, "Queers for Palestine." That's what she said, "Queers for Palestine." And I said, do you know what would happen to you if you went to the Gaza Strip, or if you went to Iran, or if you went to some of these places? You could be thrown off a building. You wouldn't last a second. And even if you did, you couldn't live the life that you live here, where even if someone makes fun of you, you're allowed to live your life. So that's another show, because we're running low on time. Another show about education over indoctrination. You want to teach the kids math and science, history. I think we could do a better job teaching these kids about the founding documents, and even into the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, the freeing of the slaves, of course, the Constitution, geography. Do you know how many kids probably couldn't even pick out their home state on a map? It's sad. It's sad. If you
you said it right. You also have a lot of these people that are protesting. If you gave them a map and you asked them to find Palestine on the map, they couldn't find it.
Right.
But yet they're out there
protesting. And they keep saying from the river to the sea. They don't even know which river, the Jordan River. They don't even know what they're talking about. One lady was protesting. You know what she was saying? From the nation to the sea. And then the guy said, "What are you talking about?" "I meant to the mountains, from the mountains to the sea." What mountain? So you're not educated. Look, I don't protest. There's certain things I don't talk about because I don't know what I'm talking about. If I'm going to talk about something, I'm going to educate myself before I speak so I don't sound like an idiot like some of these students. Listen, Ed, we're running very low on time. I want to thank you for watching. I think this was a great conversation. I'm going to have you back on where I really want to focus on education compared to indoctrination. There's a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about. I also want to say for you, Ed, I wore my Fordham shirt. All right, another good Fordham man. I want to thank my audience. I really, really appreciate the people that comment because you're part of the show. I wish I could read all of them. My producer's pretty good. He hands me the little phone. I forgot my iPad. But thanks for watching tonight on cable, channel 115. The show with Matthew Aloha. Barbara Williams on Monday, New Year's Day. Happy New Year, everybody. 7 o'clock live. And Paul Bond, comedian, a very, very funny guy. Very irreverent, but on Facebook we don't have to bleep it out. So you have a great night, and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Take care, Ed.